We're going to go ahead and get started. So you should be seeing the slide with the HR management course on it for today. Chat box, like I said, don't forget, put your name in there. And updates. The HR project, I have started grading those. Looking good so far. So all of you guys, I'm looking forward to reading all of those. I tell you, it's been really good, the few that I've gotten into so far. If for some reason any of you have not gotten that turned in, put it in, okay? Always put it in. Better late than not put it in. So be sure to get that turned in if you have still not gotten it turned in. The exam review sessions, you should have seen the announcement that there's 2 options for exam review. And one of those is on Thursday, one of those is on Saturday. And there will not be recordings because we're going to be doing breakout sessions during that. So feel free to communicate with each other. If, you know, if you want to, I'm not sure the best way to do it. I think you can see each other, I don't know, in the discussion if you can. But reach out to me if you need me to go between to connect you with someone else. If you want to try to put it in the chat, I think it still lets you do that. And we'll leave some time at the end if you guys want to connect with someone else. If you feel you're going to miss it or you just want a study buddy, because I always think that's great. If you talk through things, you tend to remember what you hear each other say. So 2 study sessions available, and just brief overview again. It's going to be, I think I have 40 multiple choice questions and 2 essay. So when I said the word essay, some of you probably went, so don't do that. Essay are your opportunity to share what you know, okay? I don't create those to try and get people, oh, they won't know this, okay? It is your opportunity to share what you know. So never leave an essay question blank. If you haven't already figured that out, never leave one blank. So that's what it's going to look like. I will give you pretty good heads up on what kind of content that's going to be whenever we meet for those 2 sessions. And then the exam is scheduled to be open from noon on the 10th, which I think is Saturday. I know it covers weekend time and week time. So noon on the 10th through noon on the 12th. It's not on Connect. I had to stop and think of what it was called. It's going to be through the actual Blackboard system, so it still will have a timer on it. But I told you guys at the beginning of the semester, I like to focus on teaching. I'm not here to track down people who try to cheat, because if you wanted to try to cheat, you were going to find a way no matter what I do. And at this point, you guys are in master's programs, and I don't expect you're doing a lot of cheating, because you're in this for you, and it would not behoove you to cheat. So 5 points extra credit if you'll get the course evaluation completed and sent back in. Some of you have already done it. So if you have and you don't have the copy of that completion or whatever, send me an email. Just let me know, because I can go tell if you, well, no, I can't tell who's completed it. I can send a generic email to people who have not, but if you have completed it, just email me so I know. And actually, I just sent an email to anybody who has not probably got one. It's in the system, and it lets me type the email, and then it sends it because the system knows who has or has not done it. All right. What else? That QR code over here is for the exam review sessions. So if you want to get a shot of it and go to it afterward to pick one, I've got an hour scheduled on there for it, and we'll go through what you need to know. But I'm going to wait just a minute in case anybody wants to get a QR code shot. You can, I don't know how much you guys use those. You can aim your camera at it with an iPhone. You don't even have to take a picture unless you want to save the QR code for later, but it'll pull up the website. I'm not sure on Android. I don't know how that one works. Let me let somebody else in. All right, and today's speaker, we have Ken Jenkins. So I could read through all this wonderful stuff. He's got great experience, but I'm just going to tell you, I've known Ken now, I guess it's been at least 2 years. We actually went through the coach training together with Minna, who spoke last week. And Ken and our other friend Tara and I, we just all connected from the very beginning, have great conversations. We meet every week and we talk about our different projects and things that we're doing. And it's just been a great experience. So I'm really happy to have Ken. I'm going to let him share the more detailed part of what his experience is. So Ken, you are co-host now, which you love to drive the PowerPoint, I know. So It's all yours.
All right, let's see how well I do this with the technology here. Good morning or evening, everybody. Let's see here, see everybody else, but good morning, everybody, or afternoon again, depending on where you are. As Ellen said, my name is Ken Jenkins. I'm a crisis response strategist, and I'm specifically towards aviation and transportation. So I cut my teeth, and I'm going to share with you just a few things that I learned in my 20 plus years of emergency response and crisis response with regarding communication. And so I titled the slide for today every day is Crisis Communication Day, because it seems like lately in the pandemic, we're always in some kind of crisis. And how do we speak to people in crisis, and how we can take the things that from a crisis and use those communication skills in our everyday life. If I go too fast, let Ellen know in the chat and I'll slow down. First and foremost, I have 18 slides. If you're counting, you want to know how long I'm going to go, that should do it. The first one was the welcome. The 18th is the hey, thanks for coming. And then there are some pictures. So really 16 slides. And so now we're already down another one. So there you go. So what is a crisis response strategist? As an aviation crisis response strategist, you may know when there's an airplane crash, with fatalities or no fatalities or a combination thereof. And if it's in the United States, the National Transportation Safety Board is in charge of the accident scene. And they'll investigate that accident to make sure what they think caused the accident and recommend any safety enhancements that need to be made. On the other side of the spectrum are airline employees that are now federally mandated to have, airlines are federally mandated to have a team of people that will come in and work with the families in the aftermath of a disaster. And that's to help them, help those that are impacted by the disaster with hotel rooms and accommodations if they want to come to the accident scene, flying in family members, access to the medical examiner if necessary, and just a whole host of services. American Red Cross if they need social and or any psychological services performed, mental health, well-being, and things of that nature. And the airline's required to formalize a plan, have a call center, and work with all of the families in the aftermath of said disaster. And during my tenure as an airline representative, I worked for American Airlines for 26 years. And I'll let you think about that for a minute, because I know you're all looking at me thinking, wow, he looks really good for being there for 26 years. I know that's what you're thinking. In my tenure as a crisis responder for American, which wasn't my day-to-day job, I actually was in human resources. I worked in career development and executive planning and compensation, and was a volunteer. But from 1994 to 2004, we had 8 fatality events, including the terrorist activities of 9/11. I spent 10 years in human resources and as a volunteer, and then moved in 1999 into teaching the program for CARE as a senior analyst, and then in 2001, early 2001, became the manager of the program for the next 7 years. So I had a lot of experience in responding to accidents. Overall now in my career, I have 14 fatality events and other, I'll say less serious, if you will, an evacuation maybe on an airport. So in my 26 years, I always like to let people know that I did have a lot of time in human resources, and then it kind of somehow morphed into emergency response. And I'm still to this day trying to figure out how that switch took place. So the picture you have here is a picture of an accident from 1994. And this is what the families see on TV. And then the airline members, such as myself, will be assigned to family members to come in and talk with them about the accident. And if family members have questions, they can ask their team member, their airline care team member, and then we'll provide that question to the National Transportation Safety Board, and then family members are briefed. So it's a little bit of background. Not everybody knows these airlines have teams. There's never going to be a 30-second, infomercial on, hey, fly us because we have this team. Just doesn't market well, it doesn't sell well, but they're all there. And now we're starting to see these teams and departments formed worldwide. So a question, and I'd like to ask you either to go off mute and answer, or or just type in the chat room. For just a second, let me take you to, if you were a survivor or a family member of someone that died in an accident, what would be the number one thing you would want to know? What's the number one thing you want right away? Accident occurs, what is it that you want?
Ken, I see answers, explanations. Is my family okay? To know how it happened or what happened. Those are some of the things popping up in chat. Is everyone safe?
Yep.
How?
All perfectly reasonable. Those are, we all want to know what happened. Is my loved one okay? If everybody's fatality, when will I get my loved one back? The number one thing, if we classify all of that and pull it all together, the number one thing that family members want that we've seen, and I say we collectively, the transportation industry and others in crisis response, is the number one thing is information. And the information consists of the things that you mentioned. What happened? Is my loved one alive or dead? What hospital are they in? When can I have their remains? Where are they? All the way down to, you know, who are you and what can you do for me? Because this isn't a routine type situation and people are out of their norm, what they're looking for is any kind of information to help provide some kind of stability or framework, if you will, by which they can have this anxiety that, or stress that they're experiencing, but still have an understanding of what's going on. And I ask you this question because it's going to be fundamental to what we talk about with crisis communication skills. What I've seen from working with families and team members over the last 20 plus years is that there are themes that occur in each accident. And we've seen things like wanting information. Folks want the truth. Don't make it up. Don't go on a limb and say, I think it's this if you don't know. So we're always telling in classes that we don't speculate. We'll look at what's in the media, but then we'll look to the investigators for facts versus speculation in the media. Family members want to see the humanity behind the airline. And what that means is they want to see the person. And that's true in, I think, everyday communication, whether you're responding to a crisis or not. People are looking for who we are as individuals and where our heart is and how we come across. Family members are also looking for folks to listen. And that's the active listening, not the listening where I'm listening to you and I'm not talking, but I'm processing in my mind what I'm going to say next. You know, like what your spouse probably does sometimes. And I get really irritated when my spouse does that because I can see the crossover in his eyes. I'm like, wait, stop. You're not listening to me. No judging, no bias. It's just, I'm listening for the emotion in your voice. I'm listening for the content. We're going to talk about how to do that effectively here in just a few minutes. And they're looking for integrity. And from the integrity perspective, it's very simple. Say what you mean and deliver what you promise. If you say, I will be there at 9 a.m. to visit you, you're there at 8:59 or 9 a.m., not 9:01, not 9:02. If you say, I'll do this task for you, you do that task for that person and you honor your word. There are other things. These are the ones that we're going to kind of touch base on more in terms of communication today. So, you know, I've done this for a long time and I have to just complete candor and honesty with you. Things have been nagging me about how the communication is set up. And there are a couple of things that I think to be mindful of. And we're going to come to the communication model in a minute. But I'd be remiss to say if we don't include the universal needs of human beings, you may have heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. There are 4 fundamental needs of folks in crisis. And if we look at the bottom left, we see information. And you already told me that. You know, you have questions, you want answers, that's your information. We're also looking for physiological needs. Where are the restrooms? Do you have something for me to drink, water, a snack? Anything to take care of basic comfort, which then ties itself into feeling safe in the environment. Is the room I'm in safe? Is there an exit? There's that kind of logistical aspect, but it's also, does it feel comfortable? Is it a place where I can sit and ask what I need to ask or hear what I need to hear? And then social connection. There is a great need for folks to have a social connection to the event. And they get that by the things that are listed in these 4 squares. If they get the information, that helps with the social connection. And we'll process through that here in another kind of picture view here in a few minutes. So in teaching crisis communication skills, and I have to tell you, to me, crisis communication skills are everyday skills. There are folks that will say, oh, I only need to use the following skills that you and I are going to talk about when there's a crisis. And I'm like, if we all did it every day, the world would just be a better place. But let's go back and look at, if you've taken any basic communication class, you know what that looks like. And when you communicate, before we even get into what it looks like, you have to know that you have to be truthful. And I'm not referring to just a crisis. When we have conversations with colleagues, we don't embellish, we're truthful. When we have conversations with our spouses, we're truthful. The one thing that I was surprised to learn from family members, in the most darkest of times, when someone in their family or their whole family was killed in an accident, was they can handle the truth. They may be in extreme grief, but they can handle the truth. What's important is how you tell them the truth. What's your tone of voice like? Are you compassionate? Are you showing empathy? And those are the things that help people handle the truth. So at its very core, basic communication 101. And if you remember the communication model, we have a sender. And the sender sends a message, receiver receives the message. And it really should be that simple, shouldn't it? I'm the sender, I give you a message, and you get it. But oftentimes things get in the way. I have things going on in my head, I'm emotional about something, you might have worry about a project you're working on, and that information distorts the message that I sent and the message you receive. And that information in between is noise. And noise comes in 2 ways. There's internal noise and external noise. So again, in the chat room, let me ask you examples of external noise. What would be examples of external noise that you have just every day when you're talking with someone, whether you're on the phone or in person or on a Zoom call?
Your cell phone going off.
This is cell phone going off, yeah, and with a ringtone. Remind me to share something with you about that I think is hilarious. It wasn't funny at the time, but the cell phone going off is certainly external noise. What's another example?
In the chat, I have
Like
environmental. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
kids running around.
Sure, kids running around, yeah. Have a lot of that going on today, probably. Air conditioning on, TV's on in the background, radio's playing, outdoor traffic, any of those things are examples of external noise. And just to go off the beaten path for a minute and share with you at a funeral I went to recently for a friend of ours who was Vietnamese, and his father had passed away, and this was a huge funeral. There were over 1,000 people. They asked everybody, please turn off your cell phones. No, please, just out of respect, of course, for the service and the family. And it's a Catholic service, and at one point everyone's kneeling, and this poor lady, about 3 rows in front of us, and we were towards the back of the church, her cell phone goes off, and it's not just a ring. It's Beyonce's song, whatever, I don't remember the name of it, but it's If You Want It, Put a Ring on It, put a ring, that song. And so you can hear it, and it's playing, and we're kneeling and we're smirking, and we can see this woman, like 2 or 3 people in front of us, finding her purse to turn off the cell phone frantically. And she turns it off. Well, when you call somebody and you get their voicemail, but you think, I really should be able to reach them. Maybe I should try it again. They call back, and we hear the song again. And there's the song and everybody's kind of looking, everything. And it's like, not the time for external noise. Just saying, turn off your cell phones. Nobody wants to hear Beyonce at the funeral. So thank you for letting me digress for a minute.
So Kim,
yeah.
share more from the chat. So we had and I thought one that was interesting. It says outside conversations in the same room, even sometimes.
Oh yeah, sure. Outside conversations in the same room. Oh gosh, there's. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
I was going to say another person says they were at a funeral and Knocking on Heaven's Door was playing.
Yeah, we all have examples of, and this should really be a really great example for all of us to remember. Just do not disturb is the best feature on your phone at movies and funerals. So what are examples of internal noise? What's internal noise?
Stomach growling.
Okay. Well, and that could be external too, because other people can hear it, but it's inside. Sure, it's internal. What else? What are some others?
I have Teresa says daydreaming.
Okay, daydreaming.
Did someone else want to come off mute and share? And then I can share the ones from the chat too. Okay, well, they're putting it in the chat, so I'll go ahead and say daydreaming.
Emotional responses to personal strife, that kind of thing.
Yep. Emotions, which, there are maybe 1,000, I'm making it up. There are hundreds, if not more, emotions, right? And varying degrees of emotions that are inside. Some from the outside looking in, I can't see if somebody's experiencing that emotion, but internally they are. That could distort the message. Yeah. So anything else in the chat, Ellen?
I also have not being in the mindset for a meeting, mind wandering, fear and anxiety, possibly anger, overthinking. Thank you, Amy. I've had struggles with overthinking for years, but I am aware.
Is that like being in your head too much sometimes?
Yeah.
I had a coaching session yesterday where I had been in my head about something for so long I needed to talk to somebody that knew nothing about me and throw the situation out to them. And I finally gained some clarity on it because I just couldn't get out of my head. The internal noise was just stopping me from getting to any productive point about that. It's the same kind of thing here. The internal and the external noise, and you see the noise between the sender and the receiver. And this is what is taught in virtually all communication classes. There's a feedback loop and there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into into the communication model. But what it misses is the real reality of the noise in everyday life, much less a crisis. The noise really isn't between the sender and the receiver. The sender has their own internal and external noise. The receiver has its own have their own internal and external noise. We may be hearing the same thing, so we're both hearing the external noise, but inside, I'm scared to death to talk to the family about whatever it is. I'm scared to tell my spouse about something because I'm afraid I'm going to be too vulnerable and I'm going to get hurt. Internal noise. And the heart rate can go up. All of a sudden you become tongue-tied, or you can't talk at all, or you decide to let it sit or go by the wayside because fear gets in the way. Fear's internal noise as well. So how do you overcome those things? So the more I thought about this, I'm looking at just this basic model. I said, even having the internal and external noise for the sender and receiver really doesn't work for me, because real life looks more and is more complicated, I think. It's more like we as the sender or the receiver get really small and the external noise gets really loud and the internal noise gets really loud. And sometimes all of those things around us fade the sender and the receiver away to where we're almost gone. Neither one of us might be able to say the message we need to or receive the message we need to. There's a lot of focus, usually in a communication class, on the feedback loop. And that's certainly important. When you give information, you ask for somebody to repeat it back. if you really want to increase your chances of having good communication and effective communication and deep, meaningful relationships with people, how you share things with each other, then you really have to manage both sides of the noise, the external and the internal. So I'm going to give you an example, one way of how to manage noise. And then what we're going to do is look at this in a breakout session, and when Ellen will break you into groups here in just a moment. So here's an example. When, and I'm going to use crisis because I'm going to turn it way up, because if we can do these things in a mass casualty event, you and I should be able to do these things every day. If we can do it then, we can certainly bring it into our everyday life. In that picture that you saw at the very beginning of that accident, I worked with a family where the gentleman was married, and he was probably in his mid to late 40s, wife, same thing, and she was on the plane and she died. I had contacted him that my care team partner and I would fly to Chicago, which is where they lived. We'd be arriving that night. And I would call him when I got there to set up a meeting where we could meet and introduce ourselves and explain what our role was. And I got there into O'Hare about 7:30 in the evening. My partner showed up about the same time. We'd never met each other before, so you can imagine what the noise level for us was like. We didn't know each other. It was our first activation. Our internal noise was really high, and there's a lot of activity at an airport, right? You know, it was before 9/11, so everybody could come in and out of the terminal and stuff, and we're going to our command center that was set up. So there's a lot of activity, lots of noise. We called the family member, said, you know, we're here, but due to the lateness of the hour, if you would prefer to meet in the morning, you know, name your time and we'll be there. And his answer back to me on the phone was, oh no, I want to meet you tonight. It's like, oh, okay. Well, it's before cell phones, right? Like the Apple phones and things and Androids we have today. So we looked at where they lived, how long we thought it would take to get there, and we said we could meet him by 9 o'clock in the evening. And I said, I hear though a lot of noise in the background, and I honestly I had been through the training, right? I mean, I wasn't teaching this at the time, but I wasn't taught to do this. I just heard all this noise in the background, like people talking and stuff. And I said, it sounds like there are a lot of people in the house. And he said, there are. I have some family members here, neighbors are here. They all want to know what's going on. We've got the TV on. And I said, well, and that's fine, but with the information we have to share and questions you may have for us, you may not want a lot of people in the house when we get there. And that gave him the opportunity to manage the noise, because he may not have thought of that. And by the time we got there at 9 o'clock that night, there were only 3 people: the husband of the passenger, his brother, and the sister-in-law. So there were 3 people. But that's an example of managing the external noise. So what we're going to do now is take a few minutes. Ellen's going to send you into a breakout room. And I think we're going to spend 5 minutes. If you're back sooner, that's great. 5 minutes. And I'd like you to come up with, in your groups, ways to manage external examples. Come up with external noise examples. How could you manage it? And how would you manage internal noise? And keep in mind, manage doesn't mean you get rid of it completely. You just reduce it the best you can so that the message you're going to deliver can be heard. Here's an example of external noise. I forgot to turn off the landline, and there's a message coming out on the machine now. And I'm like, doggone telemarketers, I hate that. So there's a great example there, right there on the fly. Can't make this stuff up. Via chat, or if you want to come off of mute, what were some examples of external noise, and how did you handle them?
I have an example of external noise. Wait, can you guys hear me?
Yes, go
Yes,
ahead.
John.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So basically, the the example that we use, basically relating back to the situation with the funeral and, the ringtone going off. Basically, the solution that, my group and I were able to come up with was that we would just take precautions in regards to your phone going off, like basically putting your phone on silent or turning your phone off in general. And to also make sure you alert those who you may feel like may disturb you during the funeral. Just let them know ahead of time, like, hey, I'm going to the funeral, I'll hit you guys back whenever it's time for me to leave or whenever it's over. So that way, taking those type of, preventive measures would also stop you or the situation from happening externally.
Excellent. Thank you. And I think it was Mary in our group had a similar idea about turning off the phone and some other discussion around that as well. So good. What's another example of external noise and how to manage it?
We had an example of like if you're fixing to go into a meeting, that the environment would be kind of closed off, and that way you could sit down and you would be able to hear. But it was both external and internal, because if you're one of those people that have a lot on their mind, then you could sit down before the meeting, kind of write everything out, so you could go into the meeting kind of focused on what you're supposed to be focused on.
Mm-hmm. That's an excellent idea. And as you take the external noise, which you handled, and now the internal noise, let's go take another example of internal noise. And then I want to come back to, how do you say your first name?
Delicia?
Delicia, I want to talk about for just a second that writing things down for a moment. Let's get one more example of internal noise, and then we'll kind of pull all this together for you. Anyone else on internal noise?
For internal noise, one of the things that we wanted to do is better be able to understand our emotional reactions during conversations. Mm-hmm. And one of the ways we can actually prepare for that is actually by reading this book here. It's called mm-hmm. Crucial Conversations. Mm-hmm. It's definitely been instrumental to me in my growth and development. And it allows us to understand that, when you have these difficult, crucial conversations, that sometimes the adrenaline takes over and the chemicals get releasing in your brain. So take a moment, sit back, understand what you want to accomplish during the conversation, and be able to respond appropriately in order to succeed with the goal.
Now, thank you for sharing that way. It's an excellent summary, and Crucial Conversations is a great book. But what I heard from the two folks, and with you included there, was a plan. What is the plan? I know I have this information now about the chemicals, and I know all of that, and given the situation, I may not go back to that book and remember that unless I start practicing it all the time and I have a plan. So one of the things that I share with people, and for me, it's my example of managing internal noise is a job interview. And in many companies, you have panel interviews where you're one of 4 or 5 candidates that go in and sit down, and the other side, the company might have 2 or 3 or 4 people that are interviewing, and they ask a question and they're waiting to see who the first one's going to be to answer. I'm pretty nervous in an interview, and I think I interview quite well. I think we all think we do. I always take a notebook and I hear the question and I write the question down. I don't write the question down because I want to make sure I answer it correctly. I write the question down to give me a second to think about how I'm going to respond. But it also sends a message to the folks on the other side that I'm thoughtful about what I'm doing. I want to answer what they answer. And then my hope and prayer is that the first person is going to answer the question, but not really. They answer kind of a form of the question, but they don't really get to the heart of it. And then you have the opportunity to look back down at the question and say, well, while I respect the answer that Ellen gave, I thought the answer or the question that you asked was this. And then everybody goes, yes, that's exactly right. And now you're in the lead as a candidate. But my point for that is it helps reduce the noise if you write it down, if you have a plan. We teach that in crisis communication skills. What are you going to say to the family? How are you going to introduce yourself? What are the 3 messages you have to give them, or 4, whatever it is? How do you summarize it? There's a whole litany of a process there, and we'll talk a little bit about that, because I want you to take these skills and use them every day. So the conversations I heard were all really rich around the external noise and the internal noise, and I'd really like you, as you go forward, to be thinking about that when you have conversations with people, what you can do to manage that noise. For most of us, what we're looking for in our relationships, and by that I mean whether it's a spouse, somebody you're dating, just a team member at work, we all like to feel connected, right? But when something's going on and there's anxiety, and in this case a crisis, people may feel exposed and anxious. And yet there's still that underlying need to feel connected. The way they get that connection may be numerous, but one of the key ways is via information. What's going on? Why did you talk to me that way? I feel like something's amiss here. I just can't put my finger on it. Can we talk about it? When you hear questions like that, they're looking for information. Something's not feeling right or settling with me. The lack of information is lack of connection. And that can exacerbate the anxiety, which means the communication between the sender and the receiver is going to be filled with noise on both sides, and it's just not going to be as effective, and you may not get to the solution or resolve as efficiently or quickly as you would like. So keep in mind the information, and we'll pull all this together again here with a plan. And I'm going to give you 2 skills to start with. And these are skills that I think everybody uses every day, but really think about these 2 together. First is empathy. And empathy is understanding, for purposes of our discussion today, it's understanding and being aware of the other person's point of view. It's not that you agree with their point of view. You may not like their point of view, but you understand what it is and you're aware of it. And I can show empathy by being understanding of what they might be experiencing. The second skill is validation. And that's to restate or echo back feelings and content. Oftentimes in crisis, our team members say, I'm scared, I don't know what to say to the families. Validation, I think, takes that noise away, because validating is simply restating back what you've heard. So you don't have to think of what to say. The family will tell you. So if you think of somebody at work, for example, if you're just at everyday work, you have a team member that's upset and they come in to talk to you and they say, I can't stand that Ken Jenkins. He did this and this and this, and it makes me really angry. And you just say, what did he do? Boy, I'd be mad too. Then you've made it about you. You didn't validate. Validation would be, wow, I can see that you're really angry right now because Ken did this and this and this. That's right. That's exactly right. And when you do that, the person feels heard and more valued. If you have those conversations with your spouse and you validate and you say, I heard you say this, is that right? And the spouse says, no, that's not what I meant. Then there's noise somewhere. We're not hearing or receiving the message right. So we validate, this is what I heard, is that correct? So empathy and validation are key. There are a few others though. And before we go on, actually, empathy and validation, they're harder than it looks. They're really nice words, and particularly around validation, because when you look at validation, echo back feelings and content. Ellen and I were talking about this yesterday. Most people are quite comfortable in echoing back the content, but we tend to stay away from the feelings and emotions because we don't want to talk about those. But particularly around somebody that's angry, if you don't discuss or validate the anger, it won't go away and it could escalate. As soon as you acknowledge it, then it levels where it is and may come down. So many of you have said in the breakout and then during the discussion now with us is have a plan. So when you have a work conversation, a spouse conversation, somebody, you have to deliver news at home that you got laid off, or you're excited you got a new job. It can be good stuff too, where there can be a lot of anxiety, which can be a good anxiety. Plan it out. Think of, how am I going to reduce my noise, internal and external? How am I going to reduce other people's noise so that they can hear my message? How can I make them comfortable? Know exactly what the message is that you want to convey. And I think it was Wade said, I would write it down. Write it down. Because if you get nervous and forget, you may give the wrong message. So write down the message. How much time do you have? If you have something really serious to say to somebody and you only have 5 minutes to share it, that's probably not the time. Do you have a window of time that is appropriate? Because if it feels rushed, it will come across possibly as not sincere, and you certainly could exacerbate the situation. Having a plan is the best way to do that. Think about the noise, how you can manage it in and out. Remember that people want to feel connected. Simon Sinek has written several books. This is one of my favorite books, is Start With Why. And he says, psychologically speaking, people have a need to belong, whether it's to a group, a cause, or an ideology. And we all play in how people feel connected or disconnected based on how we manage our communication and the noise. So as we wrap up this kind of quick dip into that aspect of the communication model, let me ask you, what are some of the key takeaways you have from just our brief conversation today and examples that we've talked about? What are some things you can do going forward now to make your communications more effective, more meaningful, and have deeper conversations with people?
I like what you said about writing down like a question. That way you can go back and read it again.
It's nice to have, it is nice to have it written down. And you know, the flip side to that too, Mary, even is when you ask the question, you can even take notes when somebody answers. You know, it depends on the conversation, you know, what is it appropriate to do that or not. But that's certainly another way to say, I'm listening to you, I'm writing it down. If it's in a meeting, you might need to do that. And then you can validate it back. So what I wrote down were these things. Are those right? Did I capture those correctly? And you start to bring the communication into finer focus. Ellen, anything in the chat while we wait for somebody else maybe to?
Yes, we have. Being more aware of internal and external noises now, reducing internal noise and figuring out your techniques to reduce them.
Mm-hmm.
Showing empathy, active listening, validating feelings, and taking control of internal and external noises. We also have working to show empathy and validate others' feelings. So another and another person with same kind of thing, validation and working on active listening.
Thank you.
Three big takeaways I feel: preparedness, adaptability, and empathy.
Preparedness, adaptability, and empathy. Michael, excellent. I mean, we have to be flexible and we can be adaptable if we're prepared. One of my favorite sayings and we use is options equal success. What are my options in this situation? You know, we're talking specifically today about noise, but what are my options to help me be prepared and to help the other person feel prepared? Yeah. What are my options to limit the noise, as an example? It's also knowing yourself and what you are capable of in terms of managing your internal noise and not. And it becomes a challenge, I mean, oftentimes in a team dynamic, because everybody's feeling different things and you're managing all these different aspects. But if you know that going in, then you'll be better prepared and able to adapt accordingly. So what I came back with, and if you have any more, please feel free to, I'm going to put some on the board here and then you guys can continue to share, is what we started with at the beginning. My hope was at the end that you would learn a few takeaways in terms of how to manage the noise, internal and external. Remember the universal needs. People need to feel safe. How can you do that? Sometimes it's making them feel safe by physiological needs, a bottle of water, a snack, depending on who you're with, what the message is at work, and a crisis in the family. Think of the universal needs. And always remember, number one thing they want is information. Truthful information. Direct. You don't have to be direct and say things in a way that is frightening. For example, we don't tell someone in a plane crash that their loved one was fatally injured. Because if we say that, what are they going to assume?
Thank you.
They're injured. What hospital are they in? Because I'm not going to focus on the word fatal. I'm going to go hopeful. So to be direct, we say they didn't survive the accident or they died in the accident. And we won't use fatally injured, no euphemisms. Remember, people want to see your heart, the humanity behind whatever your response is. Listen actively. And with that, I'll tie it up with any questions you may have from our whirlwind tour of Communication 101. What questions do you have?
Y'all can be quiet now.
Internal noise may be really high. Or it's almost the external noise is like, hey, I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm going.
I did have a couple more comments I can share too about the, Sarah mentioned about the quote as how you share the truth or how you tell it, reminding her that delivery is as important as the message. So to watch her delivery.
Yes.
And then we had validation and empathy are hard to do, but they're definitely needed to communicate. And noise is everywhere, which is true, and it won't go away, but you have to manage it. And then let's see, balancing the noise and being more aware of that. So.
Oh, I'd love a copy of the chat if
Yes.
you have one, and if
Yeah,
I can get it before you close that, because those are all true. And the funny thing, folks, about all that, I mean, I've done this a long time, as you have done your whatever your skill set are that you practice and utilize all the time. It doesn't mean we don't really use them all the time.
Yeah.
I know about validation and empathy. I don't always use it. Sometimes the snarky comes out, and boy, does that increase internal noise for somebody else when the snarky comes out. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And we usually do it with those that we're closest to, right? Honey, is there anything wrong? No. You know by tone of voice something's wrong, right? And your internal noise is like, uh-oh, and you start processing it back. But the more we do practice this on a daily basis, particularly during COVID, the less anxious and stressful we'll feel and the folks we communicate with. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share this with you today. My contact information is on the screen there for you. If you want to know more about coaching or emergency response work and just to see what that's like, there's a lot of information on my website. Feel free to check it out. Ellen, thank you for the opportunity to be here today.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad you were here. And I hope everybody is doing well. And let me know if you have any questions. Feel free to reach out. And I'll see those of you that sign up Thursday or Saturday.